Hello and welcome to Bad Marriages in the Bible.
Hey everybody, welcome back.
I'm Kate.
I'm Sean.
And we run Dandelion Ministries, which is dedicated to sharing the grace of Jesus Christ in your place of need. And we love to do that through creative means like this podcast, retreats, painting, like actually leading you in a painting project. People are always like, what? You want me to actually do something on that piece of paper? But all ages love it. And it's always worth it because art sneaks behind the defenses, as Sean loves to say. And he will, he loves to use music to do this very same thing. And so we are looking at the Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs, in our survey of the bad marriages in the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's found right in the center of your Bible. So if you just open up to the middle, there it is. And we have been marching through chronologically, like starting from page 1 of the Bible, walking through the different marriages and their twisted relationships and all of the stories that they tell on themselves. Because the whole point of the Bible is to show that we need a savior. And when you have been forgiven and loved by just such a savior, you end up being free with your testimony about all of your wrong turns. And look what he did. Look at his redemption. Look at his love. Look at his how he brought new life out of this. Look at the power of forgiveness. And so you end up boasting in what God and Jesus has done, and not in look how awesome you are.
Right. Yeah. And as we always say, we see most of our need for redemption in the context of relationships. In fact, always. It's either in a relationship with God or with others or yourself that you see your brokenness and your need. And so we figured, we're married people. Let's talk about marriage. And so we are doing that. And we're seeing the Lord bring redemption through these different relationships and how he has chosen to work through regular people like you and me. The Bible's just full of regular folks. And that's good news because he's a God who actually can do something about what you're going through right now and has in his son. And so we got all the way to Solomon in 2 Kings, and we took a pause and went to one of his more famous books, which is attributed to him, Song of Solomon, as Kate said. And it's an interesting book because it celebrates sex and love and romance and marriage, and it's attributed to a guy who had 700 wives, as we've said. So we thought, why not look at that? And it is an interesting book because it's kind of like, if you're not in a relationship right now, you might think I just want to stay away from that like the plague.
Yeah.
But there's actually a lot of depth to it, and it actually does, as we've said, show us a type of relationship with the Lord for us, that this is actually a picture of the level of intimacy and passion that we'll have in an eternal love with Jesus and with God. And so he is love, as John says, and he's the one who created this whole picture to show the reconciliation of the others, a man and a woman, and opposites, and bringing them together in a reconciled way. And that is a mirror, or it's not exactly a mirror, but it's definitely a foreshadowing, a reflection. So mirror, I guess, reflection, that works. But of our relationship with him, as we are the bride and he is the bridegroom. And so there's a lot in this book that can speak to you in your place of pain, whatever it may be. As we said, this is, we want to experience his grace where we need him. And if we're coming out of a broken relationship, or if we're sitting in a place where we feel very, very lonely and we just wish we could find that person, or what have you, whatever it might be, or we're in a relationship that's kind of stale at the moment, or there's a lot of pain in it. This is good news. The fact that God is a God who actually created intimacy and is coming after us, like we see the two pursue each other in this book, and that he is actually going to he is bringing us to himself, and he is um, having his banner over us, which is love.
That's very good. So we're gonna adopt the natural way of interpretation, which is going to look at the way a husband and a wife love each other and have sex with each other.
Mhm.
And then we'll also bring in the typological interpretation, which is where you see the historicity of a text, that this was actually a real man and a real woman, even if it was a collection of poetry, it was between a real man and a real woman around the time of Solomon, probably Solomon himself too. So the typological approach has the historical and the natural reading in view, but then looks for patterns in the New Testament that are fulfilled by Jesus. And so, just what Sean was saying. And God invites that. He, in Jeremiah 31, which is in the Old Testament, not far from the Song of Solomon, through the prophet Jeremiah, God says when he's creating a new covenant, pointing forward to him giving his son to save us from death and from sin, he says, I am faithful to you, for I am your husband. So it's in the New Testament with Ephesians chapter 5, Jesus being the bridegroom, loving his bride, the church, but it's also all over the Old Testament.
Mhm.
Jeremiah 31, passages in Ezekiel, Hosea. So it's very, you don't have to pick one. You can see both lenses of interpretation.
Right.
And a very popular one was allegorical for many centuries, especially up until the Middle Ages. But we're going to not do that one so much because the text doesn't lend itself to that, because allegorical doesn't really need to be historically grounded. And usually, if it is allegory, it'll give hints for that, that it is, Mr. I don't know, Pilgrim's Progress. That's an allegory, or
Sure.
sometimes in the allegories, the vine and the eagle, and like they're, I don't know, given names that really show you that this is an allegory representing something.
Right.
Those are all horrible examples. So,
So there we are. Let's get out of that.
Okay. So anyway, that is, many historical Christian leaders have adopted that view, and praise the Lord. Go for it. But we're going to take these other two approaches.
Yeah. And so on that note, we're not going to get into allegory, but we are going to talk about imagery, because that's what allegory, like Kate was saying, always picks up something and kind of makes it like, eagle truth or something, whatever it is. And it's like, and then
Thank
I was
you.
going
You're
with
trying to
eagle.
You're just trying to
Trying to go
rescue.
over that. But, that's not what we're doing here. What we actually see is two real people that are talking about their love, and they're talking about it in very poetic terms, and they're using a ton of imagery. And you were saying to me before we started recording that that actually allows this to be wonderfully romantic book without venturing off into pornography.
That's
Where it's
right.
like it's not a pornographic book, because it's not just describing to you the actual acts of things, but it's actually painting a picture for you in poetic terms, and so it carries this beauty, and it also leaves a lot of space in there, and so
Yes. It invites you to feel what they are feeling,
yeah,
to feel the longing, to feel the being admired or appreciated or seen. So it leads you through allusion, through metaphor, through simile, to and repetition, and the pace of the poetry too. It leads you to feel and experience what the writers and the lovers are feeling for each other.
right. So we're going to talk about the imagery today and finish out this first section that we started last week. So let's jump in, Kate.
Thank you. So the big one is that we spoke about this last time too, is that the woman is really the leader in this book.
Mhm.
She has twice as much um, discourse as the man, and she begins it, and she pursues him a lot, and she wants him to kiss her with the kisses of his mouth, um, and then by the end, she wants his embrace. And we're looking at the first section, the first poetic cycle in chapters 1, verse 1 to 2, verse 7.
Mhm.
And so she is a woman who is freed. There's mutual love here, mutual affection. And there's also redeemed desire. So this is a redemption of the original couple that we saw in Genesis chapter 3 that were made in the garden. And here we have this first cycle is again in a garden.
Mhm.
And we see that in the end of chapter 1. Our couch is green, the beams of our house are cedar, our rafters are pine. So they are surrounded by garden imagery. And it was the curse that, when the man and the woman turned away from God, part of the consequence of that turning away from God was that the woman would desire her husband and he would rule over her.
Mm.
And that was part of the fallenness and the brokenness and the death that was suddenly at work in the world. But all things can be redeemed and are redeemed in Jesus. And so we have a picture of a redeemed woman with a redeemed desire that is fully requited and mutual with the man.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we probably talked about this way back whenever we started this podcast, but that desire, it's not just a romantic desire, although it could be included in there in Genesis 3, but it was really more like a desire for his position.
Yes.
And that he would rule over her. And so we're seeing that's the fall. I mean, it's we just rewatched Barbie again with our kids over the weekend, and it's takes up the whole issue of patriarchy, and it is a result of the fall, and that there's one sex is ruling over the other, and the other is trying to kind of unseat the other, and so this is the brokenness that we see in our world, and what you just described, what we're seeing here is, as you said, is that reconciliation. We're seeing a picture of two people that actually want each other. We're seeing a picture of Ephesians 5, really, as you said. It's not just Jesus and his bride, but what Paul talks about with mutual submission in Ephesians 5, where the woman is desiring her husband and wants him and longs for him, and he longs for her right back, and that they actually want both. They want each other to really fully enjoy each other, so like she wants him to enjoy her and he wants her to enjoy him. And there's that frankly, for lack of a better word, like a serving of each other in the romance, and like there's a desire to please the other. And so it's not so often, it's not what pornography presents, or often in our culture what we see, which is a very kind of self-serving thing. When we talk about sex, it's like, well, I have my needs, and or I just, it gets twisted around to actually feature just one person's side of the story, if
or
that
sense
makes
of
sense.
control or
Control
dominating.
the other person's like just like a tool almost to satisfy the one, and depending on which side you're on there, but that's not what this is showing us. It's showing us actual mutual love, mutual respect, and mutual desire to serve the other, to actually, and that is actually brings pleasure and joy to the one who is serving, if
That's
that makes
right.
sense.
It does, and it deepens the intimacy.
Right.
So we'll see the power of their affirmations of each other. And so she sees him, and they use all five senses in this. And her go to is his fragrance. But he also
It's
sees.
musk.
Nice.
From Anchorman.
And so, and that is, very common in ancient Egyptian and Middle Eastern poetry. Fragrance is associated with lovemaking too. So, she, verse 2 of chapter 1, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore, the virgins love you. And so she's seeing him as this pleasing aroma. And she returns to that again in chapter 1, verses 12 through 14, that just the thought of him and the memory of him is like a cluster of beautifully smelling flowers in between her breasts. And so
Sure.
she's really brings the smell, and then she'll also go into describing him and his pleasing taste too, and how she wants that he is like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. And so she's praising him with scent and with taste, and also with sight, and she's recognizing that he is well loved by others. She's noticing his reputation and noticing how others receive him and saying that to him, affirming him in that way. Therefore, the virgins love you, in that first bit of the first chapter. And so she's really affirming him in all of these ways. And he requites that.
Mm-hmm.
And his requiting that is more in sort of visual, the way that she appears and looks.
Right, because you hear her. We talked about this a little bit last time, but just you hear a little bit of her shame voice in her darkness, and that she's like a woman who works outside, and is, like you said, a country girl to me before. She's like a country girl, and she's talking to the daughters of Jerusalem, which they are not country people. Obviously, they live in the big city.
Yeah.
And so she's kind of acknowledging to them that she is dark, and kind of understands that she's a little bit weathered from being outside all the time, and but that she's lovely. And she then kind of sets herself up in a contrast to them, and and he picks that up and is just like, you're even more special than you think, right? She uses the term that she's a lily. I'm a rose of Sharon and a lily of the valleys. And Rose of Sharon, if you're a big Mumford and Sons fan,
I love that song.
they sing about Rose of Sharon. So that's a biblical reference, everyone.
In their new album, Delta.
Yeah,
There's
new-ish.
Yeah.
Like,
like 5 years old, probably.
Yeah. But then she says she's a lily in the valley. And you were telling me, as we were talking about this before the episode, that the lily is a very common flower, right? And so she's kind of like, I'm just like one of the many flowers. And but he picks that up and says, no, you're actually a lily among brambles. You actually stand out. And then says, so is my love among the young women. So he's really highlighting her and saying, no, you're beautiful, and I see you as more beautiful than all of the young women, all these daughters of Jerusalem. So, yeah, so that's his affirmation, is really taking her, kind of downplaying herself and lifting her up.
And telling her the way he sees her.
Right.
Yeah. And that's reinforced. We spoke about it last time, I think, but I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots, that the chariots were usually drawn by stallions.
Boy horses.
Yeah. And so to be a mare among them would, again, stand out quite a bit. And there's also that other layer of, if there's a mare in there, all the stallions are going to be like, woo, let's show off.
It's going to be a problem. Gotta keep her locked away from all those stallions.
Well, the fact that, that she excites him that way, he is the stallion and she is the mare that, and he's excited around her. So,
Yeah.
um,
It is springtime here. So it's like this is the time of year when this happens, and this is the imagery the that the book is bringing out, you know. It's going to
mm,
get even more explicit in the next section, but this is the picture that they're using with the poetry is that they want you to see new life and things blossoming, things coming to life.
mm.
And the fact that all the animals start getting it on at this time of year. When you talk about the horse thing, we live in farm country and vineyards and horse farms, everything out here on Long Island. And so if you're driving down the street, you might see some of that action happening with horses. We
Mm.
did once when our kids, we were driving down,
We did. That
and it
was
was just like we
amazing.
caught these horses in the act,
Of
and
copulation. We were like,
our girls are like, why is that horse attacking the other horse? I was like, that's love, honey. That's love. But
they were like ages 2 and 4.
yeah. But anyway, this is the imagery that the book, as you were saying it earlier, it evokes. It wants you to feel what they're feeling, and to feel all that newness of life, and to feel the romance, and it's something that we need all the time, frankly, in relationships. We need to remember the beginnings. The Bible even says that. Remember the wife of your youth and all of that, and it's really drawing on this idea of the passion and the kind of newness of it. And it's something that we need to be reminded of, frankly, if you've been in a relationship for a long time.
Yeah.
That there's still there was like this hot beginning, and it doesn't have to go away, and this is, you can revisit that.
That's right. That's right. Um, spring comes every year.
That's right. Boom. There you go.
And just to highlight some more of his affirmations there, Sean was talking about the horses. I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots in chapter 1, verse 9. And then he goes on to say, your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. And so he is, she is more beautiful than the jewels, but he wants to shower her with jewels.
Mm-mm.
And then the way that he is affirming her amongst the other women, you see the chorus now shift a little bit, and they say, we will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver. And so he has, chosen her and said she's lovely and beautiful and you're special. And that kind of has an impact on her strained relationship with the daughters of Jerusalem.
Right. Well, I mean, you see, as you said before, they really think he's the cat's meow, and so when they see him really doting on her, then they are like, okay. I mean, that's been played out in so many movies too, where she Can't Buy Me Love. If you guys have seen that, 80s, it's young Patrick Dempsey.
Wow.
And but that's the way that works, is he's like, he makes a deal with the most popular girl in school, that if she just starts to like him and pretend to like him, then everyone will actually start liking him. And all the girls will be into him, and he'll find an actual real girlfriend, and he's like her lawn boy. Anyway, and then of course they really fall in love, because that's what always these wonderful teenage movies turn into. But go watch She Can't Buy Me Love to get a picture of how this is playing out here, with the daughters of Jerusalem are like all of the other school kids. So
love that.
There you are.
Love that. And I also want to note that he notices her eyes. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Again, that repetition. The narrative is speeding up here because they are moving towards climax.
And there you are.
Your eyes are doves. And he'll return to the eyes throughout and 2 other spots in the Song of Songs too. But the sense of, doves fluttering about, and also their innocence and their beauty, and their, turtle doves too. But that has who mate for life,
That's true. They're one of they're the birds that will actually stay together with their mate.
Yeah, but there's sort of a lot happening, and
Just in
the
that imagery, yeah.
yeah, the idea of sort of these white fluttering birds in her eyes that he just is captivated by.
Mm.
And so those are some of the ways that he's affirming her and she is affirming him.
Mhm.
Um, and the the narrative does speed up as they head to he brought me to the banqueting house and his banner over me was love. And banqueting house could also be the house of wine or his chambers. And so we've moved from, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth and sort of appreciating him and finding him wherever he has his flocks and into the garden and now into perhaps a chamber.
In the bedchamber.
And so and also it's going to head that way because at the very beginning for your love is better than wine. That word love can also have references to lovemaking. And that's also in chapter 5 of this book too. It doesn't have to always mean that, but it often does.
Mhm.
And so it's like there's a movement, of them seeing each other and appreciating each other and being turned on by each other. And it moves to a place of climax where she wants to not lose energy, but she wants to gain energy. So she's like, I need some food. Let me taste you. You are like an apple tree among the trees of the forest. So is my beloved amongst the young men. So he had
Mhm.
said, set her apart amongst the young women. She sets him apart amongst the young men. And apples were like also aphrodisiac foods. It may not have been like our apple. It might have just been a sweet, crunchy, juicy fruit. I don't know why they always change that, but they're like, it wasn't really an apple. It was
Why
probably an
not? Why
apricot.
can't it be an apple? It
I
might
would be
have
into
been
the
an
apples.
apple. And but either way, and it does. I mean, the intensity it goes up, because she says, "I'm sick with love." After she says all that, she's just like undone and ready to rock, and that's what happens. I mean, and she's saying, that idea of again, it's that like all things good and sweet and wonderful, and fresh, all those images are in there with the fruit, and just like how rich it can be. And then she describes the way he's holding her in verse 6, 2:6. His left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me. And there's an exclamation point.
Mhm,
It's like
mhm.
she is so excited and so glad to be with him and vice versa. And this is it, it's like what they've been waiting for and what they wanted. And so we see, as you said, the consummation here. And it's a beautiful picture. It's just like and it has all the different aspects as you said before. It's not just appreciating the physical aspects of each other, but
Mhm,
actually appreciating who they are, and
mhm,
really pulling those things out. And
mhm,
and
mhm.
and there's also something else. We had a mentor and a counselor, because as we've said before on this podcast, you always need help in a relationship. So always
Mm,
don't be afraid or shy to get outside help if you're having a struggle in your relationship. Um, but he used to say, problems in the bedroom are sorted out in the living room.
mm,
And that's one of the things that I think we see here, in the sense that they're preventing problems on one level by being verbal, you know?
mhm,
They're actually speaking to each other too. It's not just there's like a lot of communication, I guess, is what I'm trying to say,
mm.
and that
And a lot of affirmation.
right. Well, that's the particular kind of communication
Yeah.
here,
Mhm.
but it's building into the intimacy. It actually heightens it and makes it deeper, um, as opposed to not. And it's something that sometimes we have to learn. I know for me, I was not. That's one of Kate's love languages is like affirmation, affirming words,
Yes.
and I
Write me a card, tell me, and I'm like, "Woo!"
yeah, but I grew up in a house, frankly, in a family that we weren't very good at articulating our emotions, and it was like not an easy thing. And so,
You guys were quality time people.
yeah, and I still am,
Yeah.
I like quality time.
Let's just go and hang out and sit and look at the water.
Yeah, and I still like talking to you,
Mhm.
but it's like when I had to think like I need to affirm her and all that, like it took practice at first, and it's
Mm.
not something that just came to me very easily. Although I would tell her she was beautiful and like that, but it needed, you just needed it more. And that's great. But it is something that we learn and we develop.
I did have to learn to ask for that. I was really helped by the languages of love.
Right.
There are books about that, 5 languages of love. And with Sean, I find it really quite peaceful. Like, we don't always have to talk. We can sit and be quiet and enjoy something together. And that's very restful for me too. I remember when we were first dating and he would be kind of quiet. We'd be driving somewhere and I'd be in my mind like, oh my gosh, I need to think of like conversation topics or something. Like, is this being boring right now? Is this okay? And I, I've learned to really appreciate the quiet, just being with each other too. So that's not something that's not good. It is
Right.
good.
No, it affirms both sides. It's like it deepens your love when you understand and you learn what the other person needs. It goes back to that serving aspect.
Yes.
But I do appreciate that's present here, that there's multiple forms of communication that lead to deep intimacy. It's physical, it's verbal, visual, all of these things. They're engaging in all of them, and touch,
All
as
the
I
5
said.
senses. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a beautiful picture.
And if you do find that pattern present in your life, that you have different languages of love, and you find your partner isn't quite scratching the itch that you have, they can't read your mind.
Right.
And so you might just share that. And I'm sure, and then invite them to share back. Maybe there's something that you could be doing that would really bless them a lot that you weren't aware of. So,
well, and that goes, and we're all wrapping up here, but that goes to what we were saying about, the wife of your youth or the husband of your youth, it was easy. It's easy when you're starting to date because they're like so new, like the novelty is just like, whoa. And
yes.
the otherness is so exciting. And we've talked about this before on this podcast, I think, but then there's times when you've been together for a long time that the otherness can start to be the thing that is irritating, or at least just like, you're like, because it's not just the way you operate. Right. So you have to actually engage with somebody different from you.
Extra energy.
Yeah. But that, celebrating the difference and actually then leaning into it, like you just described, asking, sharing what you need and what you really appreciate, and then being curious about what they need, it revs those engines again. It gets you back into experiencing the otherness and actually celebrating it and really kind of revisiting the early days. It's like, because the reality is we change a lot. I was listening to some podcast that was talking about how just on a cellular level, because of like the ways our bodies change and regenerate and all this stuff, you actually are a different person. Like on a cellular level, like that when you get married to somebody, you're actually going to be married to like, I think it's like 5 or something, over a lifetime, 5 different people, because of just the way your body changes and the way life changes and all that stuff.
That's great.
So it's this concept of there's always more to explore and more to learn. And there's always newness there, even though we've been together for how long now? 27 years, almost 28.
Yeah, I know.
And, there's plenty of days where I'm like, who is this person that I married?
Full of surprises.
Full of surprises.
Keep it fresh.
That's right. I love it. And she's schizophrenic, but it's fine. Just kidding. It's not true.
I think that's so great. What a great point that you bring out. This functions a little bit like a psalm in the sense that it is timeless. It takes you right into the present moment. And you can say this to each other. Even when you're 80, and you're the 5th body type of your life.
I'll go back and actually nail down those facts.
Those terms, yeah. But anyway, when we're all like,
it's generally true,
super achy, can't move the way we could before, and have to go to the doctor all the time, that kind of thing. As a lily among brambles, so is my love among the young women. I would still rather, or, an apple tree in the forest. So is my beloved among the young men. Like, I still would rather you than all the young men out there. and we're
Sure.
80, you know?
Right. Right. Right.
It still works even when you're in the twilight years of your marriage, and of your bodies with each other.
Mm.
So I do appreciate that this is, it is certainly, they are young, but the affirmations are timeless
Mm.
for each other. And that, we spoke about the overall structure of Song of Songs, that the center is chapter 4, 16 to 5, verse 1. And so there it's located in the marriage ceremony right there, bride and groom coming together and they're consummating their love. And chapter 4 is about the wedding procession. But then picture that like, the handle of an umbrella, and then the that is like an umbrella over all of the rest of the Song of Songs. And so these are all love poems within, the other chapters are love poems that climax to sexual intercourse,
Right. As we
I'm-
we talked
Not
about
all
that.
commentators would agree with that, but we could totally see that.
Well, yeah, there's some commentators that see it as a chronological book where it's just start to finish, but the poetry really lends itself, as we pointed out last episode or 2 episodes ago. It's kind of 2 arrows pointing to the center. One side is pointing forward, one side is pointing back, and that's the way the Bible functions. Frankly, is the cross is in the middle, and the Old Testament's pointing forward, New Testament's pointing back, and so the Hebrew poetry is just structured that way, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's so the canopy of the wedding is over all the different expressions that we're seeing in these different poems.
And I love that right as it takes you to the moment of her climax and they're about to make love, then the poem stops because the rest is for, imagination, and it's too beautiful to be described, kind of thing.
Right.
I love the Gun Song by the Lumineers, which does that same thing. I think a young kid discovers a gun in his father's drawer, and he's contemplating the whole song about whether to use it, and he's priding himself in not ever having done that. But the song builds, and then the lyrics end, but the song builds and builds, and the music around it builds, and you just know that he has taken the gun and he's going to try it, and you're just like, ah! And it's such a good song to me. And that to me is what's here. And right as they leave the scene for their private time together, she turns back and says to those daughters of Jerusalem, save this for the proper time.
Mm-hmm.
This is a special moment between the two of us. Save this for the proper time. And I always think, back to our kids growing up kind of thing. Like, I want you to have this in all of its fullness and all of its riches. Save it for when it's safe.
It's good. And then we'll close with this. That was a good illustration with Lumineers, although gun use. I do love that song. Great song. But it made me
definitely not pro gun use.
No, it made me think of another song that does that very well, and it's U2's All I Want Is You. And that's one where he's singing. It's a song that he wrote and singing about his wife, Bono. And the song does that too, where they're just going back and forth, very similar to Song of Songs, but then it ends with the musical climax of them. Like, the response is her response to him saying, or she saying to him, "All I want is you," is musical, and it's just this incredible build and guitar solo, but it's all like rhythm guitar, which is the Edge's specialty. Who's the guitarist of U2. Anyway, those are great. 2 things to listen to: Gun Song, All I Want Is You, and you should watch Can't Buy Me Love. So these are your homework for this week.
Which is actually a quote from the end of Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, Can't Buy Me Love. It says that. You can't buy love.
There you go. The Beatles were reading Song of Solomon when they wrote that. So take us home. It's you started the episode, so you have to close it.
Okay. So thank you so much for listening. Please check out the show notes. And you can find Sean's email. Shoot us any questions. Sean at dandelionministries.org. Look at our website, dandelionministries.org, for our blogs and ways to support us and support this ministry and the show. And feel free to share this with your friends. And we'd love a review or a thumbs up. on your favorite listening platform. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.